Andy, for somebody watching this who wants to know about the jobs market in Southeast Asia and in Singapore, what jobs are there with monkeys?
What jobs are there with monkeys? A few, I would say, within Singapore before I go into Southeast Asia. In Singapore, if you talk about monkeys, I think naturally people would think about maybe teaching opportunities because that's related to biology. And so lecturer positions, professor positions in university, talking about general biology, animal behavior, touching on primates. Another one that people would think about would be zookeepers. I think when we talk to kids, even parents, they would imagine me being a zookeeper taking care of the primates. I grew up thinking that way as well. So that would be an opportunity to work directly with primates that are under human care. If people are interested to work with primates in the wild in Singapore, I work with Mandai Nature. So Mandai Nature is the conservation charity arm of the Mandai Wildlife Group, which takes care of, animals like primates under human care. So for Mandai Nature, I help to manage grants in Singapore and Southeast Asia, one of which would be supporting projects looking at wild primates. So for myself, I do research on primates in Singapore, like the Raffles Banded Langurs behind me, but also supporting researchers working on primates and other projects in Singapore and Southeast Asia. There will be other positions, I would say, with the governments. In Singapore, for example, there will be research officers and also managers within the National Parks Board looking at managing human wildlife interactions. So I would say that monkeys would be one of species of urban wildlife that come into contact with people often, and so requiring attention in terms of management.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, Andy, you are the head of species grants and impact at Mandai Nature. Uh, what does your job involve?
I would say for my job with species grants and impact, the first layer would be helping to support, applicants that come in to apply for grants to Mandai Nature because we are a grant agency. If there are proposals looking at conservation of Southeast Asia, animals, we would be looking at a proposal, reviewing it, and assessing whether we are able to support. And if they were successful, we will then manage the grants. So it could be a 1 year grant, 2 year grant, or 3 year grants with varying amounts of funding. We don't do a lot of hand holding or in-depth management, but really looking at the reports, how they're doing. Could we actually further support them beyond just providing funds? So it could also involve going to the field with them, and collaborating on other areas of work. For myself, because I'm interested in primates, and that's where I could maybe provide the most information to evaluate proposals, I will be looking mostly at the primate projects.
Great. Andy, if somebody wants to write a speculative application, send their resume, send their CV to, for example, an NGO that promotes primate conservation, or to a field primatologist to join them in the field, is there a particular time of year that is quieter when they can expect a faster response?
Are you talking about grant applications or you're talking about internship opportunities?
Internship opportunities.
I would say that typically when we receive applications to join us, it will be during the school term if they are credit bearing, especially the requests coming in from students. So it could be within their school term, say January to May or August to December. So that's within Singapore and other parts of Southeast Asia. Other times we might have shorter internship periods as that's during the vacation periods. So it could be the May to July or just December to January. So I wouldn't say we have a quieter period. It really depends on whether the students are coming in during in the university time or during vacation time.
Interesting. Mm. Your job, Andy, do you do it for personal satisfaction, professional recognition, or the money?
If you're looking for money, maybe this job would be quite wouldn't be for the money, but I would say probably because I'm really interested in primates and there was an opportunity for me to contribute. I know there is this Japanese saying, is it ikigai, where there are three layers, right? One, it's something that you're passionate in. The other factor would be something that maybe the world needs or that there is a gap to fill. The third layer would be an area where you can actually do something good at. That means you're good at doing it. So I would say that what I'm doing right now, I'm very fortunate that it's something I'm very passionate, monkeys. Something that because through my passion, I learned a lot about primates, so I'm able to contribute information to support the work that I do. And the third, it's there is a need. And why did I say there's a need was because I guess also through COVID, we realized that it's really strong interconnectedness between humans and nature. I mean, you and I, we know, but it became more in the public eye when COVID happened. And so during and post, there were more attention on how we can restore nature, having more conservation funding into this space. So there were more, I would say, need in terms of trying to restore nature, protect wildlife, and work with communities and other stakeholders.
Great stuff. Andy, how did your career develop?
Hmm. It started off when I would say I was given a pet monkey when I was 10 years old. So at that time, I didn't know it was illegal to keep a wild monkey as a pet. It was a vervet monkey from Africa brought in by my relatives who were sailors to Africa. So I kept it for a few years, and by watching it chain up at home, some stereotypical behaviors like pacing. Of course, I didn't know what pacing was or what stereotypical behavior was, but just by looking after the monkey, I realized that it's probably not happy with me, chained up under the sink. And so it took a while for me to find help within Singapore to raise funds to get the necessary permits to then eventually send the monkey back to Africa. So that episode, I would say, started off with me wanting to learn more about primates. And in university, I went to learn more about primate behavior, going to the zoo, because to me, and also within Singapore's context, I naturally thought that the zoo would be the first place for me to learn about primates in a controlled setting. And afterwards, I furthered my studies to look at primates in the wild. So it kind of just continued that way that I wasn't thinking of the career that I want to build, but more that I was so interested in them, I want to learn more about them. So eventually going to the US to get my further studies done, studying the primates in Vietnam. And so during that time, that's when I realized that I would like to do work on it. So beyond just studying and being interested in them, reading about them in books and seeing them in the wild, I want to do something that can actually impact them positively. So that was how it happened. And eventually through networking and through the grants that I received from the zoo to support my studies, we discussed how we could further this to protect the species like the langurs in Singapore and in other parts of Southeast Asia. And so that's how I would say my career started.
I'm going to use that as a blueprint for others to follow.
Blueprint, maybe a possible route.
Andy, what skills do professionals working with primates need?
I think there are various skills that we will need working with primates, and it depends on the context. So,
Mm.
say for myself, I started off with being a field researcher. So wanting to study primates in the wild would mean that, I would have to understand the risks involved going out to the jungle. And it really depends on which jungle also. Within Southeast Asia, we're talking about tropical rainforest, or are we talking about within Africa, different, context looking at primates, or in South America. So understanding the landscape, the habitats, and the primates you want to study or to work on, that is the practical side. You need to understand that. And then few observational skills, of course. If we talk about primates, it could vary from, say, the macaques, which might be easier to observe given that they are easier to habituate, versus other species of primates that might be rarer or very shy. So that will require a lot of patience beyond just observation skills. So if you talk about professional, yes, I would say being patient is also a very important professional skill to have in the field. And then also perhaps if you look at wanting to do analysis, it could be various kinds of analysis. It could be lab related, right? Genetic analysis to understand conservation genetics, inbreeding risks, and how can you protect them, in the wild. So then that will require another set of skills. If we're interested to look at translocation, right, moving primates from one place to another because this habitat is going to be destroyed and there's other areas that are more suitable, then you need to understand how do you do conservation translocation, um, beyond just ensuring that the primates survive during the process. And then, of course, I would say that if you work with primates under human care, that is also another spectrum of skills you need. It could be that you are the animal keeper, so you need to ensure the diet is well, observe its behavior, ensure that it gets all its enrichment done so that it doesn't, display any stereotypical behavior or under stressful condition. But you could also be a vet working with primates. Then you need to ensure that the animal is taken care of, whether is it in conditions that require medical attention or just the day-to-day ensuring that it's well. You could also be in the government agency or in NGO setting where even though you're working on primates, but you don't work directly with primates, you have to work with the human primates. And so it could be stakeholder engagement, communication skills, and also ensuring that you're able to bring people together in one setting from different background to ensure perhaps a species action plan is being properly developed and implemented. So again, I think it really depends on the context that you're working on.
Andy, does a person need a degree? And if so, is a bachelor's sufficient, or do they need a master's or even a PhD?
Whether a degree is necessary, I would say that especially where, in Singapore or within Southeast Asia where I'm observing, I think it is important because of just the amount of competition that you're facing. If you have a degree or other relevant skills, it's not just the paper that or certification that says, okay, you're a bachelor holder, degree holder, or master's or PhD, but more, what does this degree bring you? Um, for example, bachelor degree, if you're looking at animal science or general biology, would it be sufficient for you to look at specifically primate projects and at which level? So I would say at entry level, a bachelor degree in the relevant field in this case would be beneficial, especially if you have other peers who are applying for the same position. But if you're looking at advancing in career or doing something that's more specific, not just general primates or managing projects, which you don't really need to have a primate degree, but good to have. So say if I really want to work on primate research in the field and how we can actually increase its population size, especially really rare species of primates, having a bachelor degree might not be sufficient for me to be in the decision making position. I could be there to support the administrative work, the logistical work, the communication work, which is great. But if I want to go in or deep dive into a specific area that I'm very interested in, perhaps you then need to further your studies to get master's or PhD degrees so that you can actually bring in those expertise to do the work. So again, I think it depends on what area you're interested in, at which career or at which, level you're looking at, and whether there is a strong competition, right, for
Mm,
this.
mm. Obviously, Andy, the jobs market in Singapore and to a wider extent Southeast Asia is quite buoyant. There are several different jobs with primates available in the widest sense, and therefore a variety of skills necessary. How can people acquire the skills that they don't have?
Wow, it's actually a big question.
Hmm.
How do you acquire the skills that you don't yet have and might potentially be able to obtain if you try hard? I would say, volunteering is definitely one space that I would encourage people to endeavor into, especially because when you volunteer, you get to work with other people in related fields. And by working with other people in related fields, you understand not just about the professional aspects of the work that you're dealing with, but actually how to work in a team setting. I think that is really important, especially say for example, you might what have a skill such as communications that is underdeveloped that you want to do better, but you're not sure, right? I mean, sometimes you're not sure. You wouldn't know. You need to find opportunities to improve that. But only when you volunteer, maybe perhaps feedback given to you to say, oh, in these areas of communication, you're not doing that well. You could improve. That's when you might realize this is a gap I need to fill, and then you can continue to improve on that. But if you don't actually get into volunteering or some internship positions, or basically just see how other people work, you won't be able to find out perhaps your gaps. So once you get that, then you can look into, I think, opportunities with NGOs to volunteer or even internship positions or talk to people in the field.
Andy, if a candidate is invited to interview in person, or I suppose via Zoom, for example, for an internship or for a job, what clothes should they wear?
Firstly, they need to feel comfortable, of course not in your sleepwear. Comfortable so that you won't be fidgeting, right? Like, oh, this is too tight or this is like too warm. Comfortable in that sense. But I guess also being professional in a setting, something simple, it doesn't have to be too elaborate. I think something that you can show you put in effort to present yourself, but not in a way that you are, I guess, overemphasizing, just the clothing that you're wearing, the accessories that you're wearing, but be there to present yourself. Present yourself in words, in actions, in answering the questions, in actually doing your homework beforehand. I think that is more important.
And Andy, somebody who is attending an interview for an internship or a job, certainly in the UK, there is always a point in the interview where the interviewer asks the candidate, "Is there anything that you'd like to ask?" What are good questions that candidates can ask at interview?
What are the good questions? Let me think. This is exactly sometimes also like when you ask me for questions, it might be good to pause and think rather than immediately throw something out. But yeah, if a candidate were to do homework beforehand, I think it's important to understand the organizational structure, the organizational needs, and the areas that they're interested to maybe scale up or advance where you think you can actually support. So I think maybe a question to ask, it's for me, it's in the beginning I will already try to share my passions and how I can support you. But if there are other areas that you think I can do more, let me know. So I think that will be one area for me to ask. But again, it really depends. I guess I need to be in that situation to think of a relevant question because it also I guess depend on how the flow of the conversation is with the interviewer and whether there are some areas that you have questions about. Because sometimes when you talk to me, then the questions come about. I want to understand how your team work, right? Are they mostly working together in a setting? Are they all out in the field, doing various things? How can we ensure we collaborate better to do the projects? So there could be various questions. I think pay attention to what the interviewer asks you and how you answer. And then from there, maybe ask more questions to show that you're really interested to understand more about the nature of the work, how you can contribute to support them, not just what you want to do. So it should be a mutually beneficial setting where if I join you, you actually benefit from me contributing to your work, but at the same time, it provides a platform for me to learn, advance in my interests. So, we can both be happy.
Brilliant. What shall I? Okay, yeah, I will ask this one. Number 10.
Are
Andy,
we at 10 already?
what is an entry-level salary for working with primates in Singapore?
Wow, that's also another loaded question.
Can I afford a
Um,
BMW?
uh, Not in this life. Working with primates. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. Um, I think we are lucky in Singapore that we have minimum wages, depending on the degrees that you hold. And say, for example, you're a bachelor degree holder coming into, I would say, this conservation NGO field or even government field, we might be looking at a position of a assistant manager or one level below, which is a senior executive. So it depends on again whether you're going into the administrative support role or more in the specialization role. So say university undergrad, a graduate coming in, fresh graduate, maybe we're looking at 3,000. Again, this is very, uh, it has a wide range, whether it's in government, NGO, or in SME. So it depends, but I would say 3,000 and 3,005 would be an entry level.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Um, Andy, what questions regarding Raffles Banded Langur conservation would you like to see answered in the next 5 Langur generations?
5 Langurs generations. Wow, I probably won't be around already.
Oh, be
What
optimistic. Of
questions?
course you will. If you eat 5 pieces of fruit a day and lots of water.
What kind of research questions, conservation questions I hope we can answer.
Yes, conservation.
I think
Gotcha.
one area that I'm working a lot on is whether we could facilitate conservation translocation, right, between populations that are endangered, of the same species. And in this context of the Raffles Banded Langur, we're talking about, in Singapore and also in Malaysia. So like two countries. Um, the question I want to answer is whether we can actually see success for conservation translocation of critically endangered langur in Singapore and Malaysia. Especially, it has not been done before for this species or for related species. There's a lot of desktop references or background research on how things might work or might not work, but it's not actually being carried out in practical sense. So the big question I want to see answer is whether conservation translocation can work for this species, and also what's the success like? I think that's one big question. Um, Another question is because the population of the langurs in Singapore in particular, they are showing signs of genetic inbreeding because of a very small population size, and being isolated for a while. So, if we know about the risk of genetic inbreeding, we would expect them to go extinct soon. But another question I want to know is whether there would be ways that we can counter that again, through the conservation translocation, whether we can increase the gene pool, increase the genetic viability, and how long would that take in order to do genetic rescue. So they're all kind of related to genetics for now because of the population that we're dealing with.
Mm, mm, mm. And Andy, where do our knowledge gaps lie regarding Raffles Banded Langur conservation?
The above two questions that I mentioned. We don't know how they're doing with the genetic work and also conservation translocation. I would say that would be the research gaps. Other than that, perhaps within the context of Malaysia, because they have a larger population given their largest, distribution in Malaysia, I think it will be interesting to see how they adapt to various habitats. We could be talking about intact rainforest versus secondary forest versus oil palm plantation versus intersections with the urban setting, crop setting, agricultural areas. How do the different populations of the same species adapt to different habitats, which I think at the moment we don't really have a clear understanding.
Great stuff. And Andy, um, done that one? Yes, my favourite question. Andy, can you suggest a research topic for a wildlife biology student?
Research topic for undergraduate, master's degree, for PhD.
Oh, let's be generous. Undergraduate degree.
A research question, actually something that I've also worked on for my undergrad was on hand preferences of primates.
Hen preference?
We because we know that more than 90% of humans are right-handed,
Oh,
but you know, we also understand that there's some evolutionary genetic basis of it. There's also some cultural influences of how, we choose left hand versus right hand. But in non-human primates, a lot more study has been done on the great apes, and a few other species that are easier to work with. But, we're not very sure about hand preferences, say, on langurs. There's not, I would say, many studies, if I could even name a few, on hand preferences of langurs or columbine monkeys. So I think that will be a research question to look at the hand preferences of langurs.
Andy, are there any books on Raffles Banded Langurs?
We do. And again, depending on the target audience or what the person would like to find out more about Raffles Banded Langur. So we have a book on the Raffles Banded Langur. It presents, I would say, an overview of the species in terms of biology, its distribution, threat. So very general understanding of the species, like a one-stop place you can, look into. The conservation efforts that are being done in Singapore, especially uh that will be within the book. So you can find out more about the family tree of the population that we've been studying, some of the threats that they face in Singapore, and what we've been doing to help them. So that's more like a scientific, simple to read, 100-page book. We also have children's book on the Raffles Banded Langur. So I would say that would be a way where we want to do it in a storytelling manner. We could actually work with the children to let them learn more about the Raffles Banded Langur. So that is a collaboration with the Raffles Institution, a secondary school in Singapore, where we have this book produced. There's also an author based in Singapore, Neil Humphreys. He also had a children's book on the Raffles Banded Langur in a way to illustrate how urbanization in Singapore has fragmented their habitat and what we can do to not really reverse, but to make sure they can actually cross the road safely so that we can minimize road kills. So that's also another one. And lastly, the one that I know is there is this kind of fictional book on the Raffles Banded Langur, like an English literature kind of book, right? In the fictional world where the monkeys rule the world. So there's also having one character, which is the Raffles Banded Langur in it.
And in 3 seconds, no, I'm joking.
I'm like preparing 3 seconds. What do you want me to do?
My wife has just told me off. She says I joke far too much. Um, Andy, are there any conferences that students or interns should be looking to attend?
On primates,
Hmm.
oh, there are actually quite a few opportunities to attend depending on where you are or where you can actually get yourself to. For example, I just came back from Madagascar.
How was
I was
it?
there for it was brilliant. In 3 seconds, I can't describe how great it was, but
How is
um
Tanner?
Tana, it's very busy. But I didn't get to see much of it because we're just going from conferences back to hotel and back and forth.
Hmm.
But yeah, so the biggest primate conference would be the International Primatological Society conference that happens once every 2 years and it moves around different countries. So the one that just passed in July was in Madagascar. The previous one was in Malaysia in Kuching, and in 2 years' time it will be in China. So that is the biggest gathering of primatologists or people who are talking about primates. Nearly, I would say 1,000, 1,200 people that you can expect every time. You can learn about the work that is being done in various fields of primate research and conservation activities. And it's also a platform for you to present your work so that, for example, you want to advance in your career, looking for other opportunities to work with primates or looking for a professor to be your master's, academic advisor or PhD advisor. It's also a way for you to put yourself out there and to also learn about other people's work. So that's the biggest gathering. But it might be hard to get to if, say, it's somewhere really far away. You need a lot of funding to bring yourself to. So you can start with regional conferences or workshops. To say within Asia, we also have the Asian Primatological Symposium that happens, of course, being held in Asia. So if you're based here, it might be easier to get yourself to, whether it's in Indonesia, in Malaysia, or in Thailand, depending on where it is. In South America also, the Brazilian Primate, I would say, Society and their the basically the group that's working on primates in Brazil, they're very active. So a lot of opportunities to attend workshops or conferences that look at action plans for specific species or collaboration with various groups. Also in Africa, African Primatological Society. If you're based in Africa, you could also look out for conferences that happen within your country or within the region. I know there is the African Primate Society conference, I think happening next year. So again, just research, Google, find out where the conferences are and perhaps where you can bring yourself to.
Andy, you are the head of species grants and impact at Mandai Nature and deputy chair of the IUCN Species Survival Commission Primate Specialist Group. Thank you so much for being on the Practical Animal channel, Dr. Andie Ang.
Thank you so much for having me.